New videos every day.
Hi, I'm Radhia Gleis. I'm a certified clinical nutritionist, and this is Wake Up America. My colleague Peter McCarthy is not with us today. He's out of town, but he'll be with us next time. So today I have my friend Will of the People, and he has written an extraordinary book. And let's just say hello to Will. Say hello
Hi.
to everyone. Let me just tell you a little bit about how I got to know what Will was up to. He and I were in several long philosophical conversations about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he was telling me about a book. This is actually a booklet. He's got a larger book, but he sort of shrunk it down and made it very, very easy to read. This is called A Time for a New Tea Party. And we'll tell you how you can get more information on that book later. But Will and I were really talking about health freedom. I was telling him all of the legislative work that I do here in Texas, and also nationally. We're working on, the health reform. And we were really talking about health freedom. And then it sort of segued into freedom in general. And so what I want to talk to you about today, Will, is let's broaden this picture a little bit and talk about freedom and where it's gone in the United States. What happened? And and basically, what happened to our freedom? We're noticing, that it seems to be disappearing more and more. Mm-hmm. And I also want to talk to you about how it's happened and what we can do about it.
Sure. Well, what happened is that, and I'd like to just make a couple of statements getting into this, is that throughout the history of civilization, we've seen nations rise and fall. There's been a consistent pattern of nations rising and falling, and we've never seen any nation establish that was able to sustain itself in a viable form for a really extended period of time. And what it boils down to is that every time there's been a revolution in human history, the revolutions always get hijacked. And we've been led to believe that in our revolution, the American Revolution, that it was extraordinary and unique. One of the things we've all been told is that our Constitution is the greatest system of governing that's ever been designed. But now that we're into this period of total financial calamity and all the other things that have been happening over the last several years, we're all beginning to realize that our freedoms are being encroached and being squandered. And it's because the American Revolution was also hijacked, but we've all been unaware of how that happened. And getting into what led up to it, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, the most important part of it is the preamble, because that describes the purpose of the American Revolution. And it was to establish freedom, which was defined by Thomas Jefferson, who wrote it, as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mm-hmm. The key phrase that follows that is the most important phrase in the entire document, and that is that we secure our freedom by our consent to the powers of government. Well, when the Constitution was written, that was omitted.
Well, okay, so let me just clarify this. What basically that's saying is that the governed, you and I, right, have to give our consent to the governing body. In other words,
to the powers.
To the powers of the governing body.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in accordance to our consent, the consent of the governed. So consent is a very big difference than I think where you're about to go with how the Constitution sort of changed that verbiage a little bit. So,
correct.
Yeah. So what happened there?
Well, what happened is that all of us tend to look at the First Amendment as such an important amendment to the Constitution. And I discuss this at length in the book. And what the authors of the Constitution did, and they were Federalists, and unfortunately Jefferson was not a part of the authorship of the Constitution. The author, the person most accredited with being the father of the Constitution, was James Madison. What they did is they wrote the Constitution in two separate parts. They wrote the first part to set up the framework for how our government would be established and the powers of each branch. And supposedly under the guise that they were creating checks and balances. Well, what we see is we do not have very effective checks and balances. And the problem is that our right to consent to the powers of government were omitted from the Constitution. The powers of government are the laws that are enacted and enforced against us. But our right to consent was not included. And we cannot be free if we don't have the right to consent to what government or anybody wants to do to us.
So weren't those words sort of shifted from our right to consent to our right to petition?
That's correct.
Right?
What they
There's
did.
a big difference between petition and consent.
Absolutely.
And it puts really the power where it lies in the people as one who, you cannot do anything without my consent, to putting the power to the governing body and us saying, oh, please don't do this or please do that. We're actually petitioning. So we shift that power from the people, power of the people to power of the elected officials.
Totally.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, they usurp the entire purpose of the American Revolution. The First Amendment describes what we have perceived in our society as 5 different areas of freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom to peacefully assemble, and of course they use the language shall not be abridged, which of course these days even our right to peacefully assemble is being abridged. And then the Achilles heel in the Constitution is that they wrote that they would not abridge our right to petition for a redress of grievances. Well, petitioning is nothing but the right to complain. They did not put anything in there about being compelled to respond to a redress of grievances.
So let me just go here with the title of the book is It's Time for a New Tea Party. And I think what was most fascinating, and especially in our conversation, you and I got into lengthy conversations about how the nutrition industry, how the quote-unquote healthcare industry is basically being controlled by big pharma, big food, big corporation.
Correct.
Right? And this is where our conversation began, because as you know, I have been, fighting diligently against these big monopolizing corporations and monopolizing organizations that want to control people. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about the Boston Tea Party. Because
Sure.
most people, and this was very, very interesting, and you can look at on Wikipedia and check it out, but really about the Tea Act and how this whole corporate inclusion started way, way back when, and why actually this country became what it was, why the revolution happened, and what brought us to that Tea Party.
Sure. The great myth that we've all been taught is that the American Revolution was ignited by taxation without representation. But in fact, that's not true. And the way to see that is to look at the timeline of events that transpired prior to the writing of the Declaration of Independence. The phrase "no taxation without representation" actually came from an act called the Stamp Act, which was passed in 1765, 11 years before the Declaration of Independence. The Stamp Act was a tax on all paper goods. Anything made of paper was taxed. The colonists resented that because they made their own paper. And that led to the Stamp Act riots, which caused a great alarm to the Parliament and the King in England, and they repealed the Stamp Act in 1766, 10 years before the Declaration of Independence was written. What transpired afterwards, they passed a different set of laws called the Townshend Acts, where they decided they would tax anything imported into the colonies. The colonists weren't very wild about that, but they could understand and accept goods being taxed that they were importing. But what ignited the American Revolution was the Tea Act. The Tea Act, and if you most people, whenever you ask them what about the Tea Act, what they know about it, they'll say, well, that was a tax. It actually wasn't. It was a tax waiver for one corporation to give them a monopoly on the tea trade, which was a very important commodity at the time. When that happened, the merchant class realized that, that act, by the way, was passed in 1773. The merchant class realized that they were being legislated out of business. Essentially, and this parallel then matches exactly what's going on today. The king was the majority shareholder of the East India Company, the company that was the corporation that was benefiting from that act. The minority shareholders were the politicians and judges, members of parliament. The judges were not, of course, members of parliament, but at any rate, you get the gist. So the merchant class in the colonies realized that they needed to nip that in the bud. They saw that as feudalism disguised behind the veil of a fictitious entity called a corporation. Well, today we have the same problem. The word was not used back then, but I like to use the word, the king and the parliament were trying to Walmartize the tea trade to destroy individual commerce. And that's exactly what happens today when these big corporations like Walmart go into an area, they wipe out the individual commerce, and then the merchant class suddenly become greeters at Walmart. So this is the oppression. It's an economic oppression. And of course, this corporate type control just permeates our culture. It affects everything, healthcare, commerce of all kinds. So it's corporatism that was the cause of the American Revolution. The recognition that using corporations to disguise tyranny and enslave people was not acceptable to the founding fathers, the merchant class, and that spawned the revolution. Today we have the same problem. The corporations, the consolidation of media, and all these other industries is, the way that corporations are oppressing us. And they do that through collaboration with politicians and judges. When the Declaration of Independence was written, well, let me go just discuss a little bit the timeline. The Tea Act was passed on May 10th of 1773. The merchant class, as soon as they got word of it, around June of 1773, by the time they floated this new law across the Atlantic Ocean, which functioned as a giant moat to protect the king and the parliament, the members of parliament. When they got word of it, they realized they had to do something. So over the next few months, they managed to figure out how to wake up the people. And that's the problem that many of us are asking ourselves. How do we wake up the people? And what can we do to fix the situation? Well, back then, the original 13 colonies encompassed a land area of 360,000 square miles. And the only way they could communicate back then was by word of mouth, on 2 feet or on horseback, and they could print, little booklets or pamphlets, that kind of thing. And they had to figure out what would be the most powerful way to wake up the people to stop the tyranny. That question really intrigued me. So after doing a lot of research, I finally figured out exactly what it was. And they talked to the people about getting rid of the tyrants, the government that was controlling them, and establishing a government where the people would be free and would be able to secure their freedom by their right to consent to any laws proposed to be enacted or enforced. In the Constitution, when it was written, that was omitted. And they omitted it in the First Amendment. So what we have actually been led to believe and brainwashed to believe that established our freedom and protected our freedom took it away.
Well, there's so much great information in your book, and you and I have had, long conversations, and I would love to go on and find out more, and maybe we will meet again soon and bring some more dialogue to them. But I wanted to open up this conversation. We welcome your comments. We love hearing from you. If you want to know more about this, you can go to www.timeforanewteaparty.com.
That's correct.
They can read more about this. They can get this booklet if they want. It's an easy read, very fast, but fascinating. And it pretty much tells not only about some of the stuff that you're saying, but like I said in the very beginning, so what's the solution? Have you got an answer?
Well, that's what I've done, is in identifying the problem and how our revolution, the American Revolution, was hijacked. The remedy is for us to compel our right to consent. So in the book, I give the background and how our freedom was actually sabotaged and subverted by the Constitution, and what we can do, how we can amend the Constitution, and we can peacefully, nonviolently fix these problems and take back our country and take back control of this country so that we truly have government by the consent of the governed. And we all want to fix the problem.
Right.
Nobody wants to go out, and nobody wants chaos or bloodshed. But this government has way overstepped its boundaries. And it was a very clever scheme, and it's time that we correct the problems. And the book outlines exactly how we can go about doing that, and we can do it within one election cycle.
And it's really getting our government out from underneath the strings of Big Corp, basically.
Yeah, the corporations. It's very important for your viewers to realize that it was corporatism that ignited the American Revolution, and it is corporatism today that is choking us to death.
Mm-hmm.
And all we have to do is amend the Constitution so that we, the people, have the power to compel our right to consent to what laws we live by.
Mm-hmm.
When we do that, we're in charge, and we are the ultimate check and balance. We cannot rely on politicians. Judges have been a total failure. In fact, judges have collaborated in this nonsense. They're the ones who ruled that the Wall Street firms could just be a crime-free zone and not have to go to court, that they could actually get away. They set the table for all the chicanery we're seeing today that has set up this horrible financial debacle. And we can take it back. And so I put the solution in the book, and I'm real happy that people are really getting excited.
Well, that's awesome. I do appreciate it. And I know that this is slightly a diversion from what we usually do, but this is Wake Up America. We do want to find solutions. That's what this is all about, is really looking at things, laying things out on the table. Obviously, my thrust is solutions, well, on all of these subjects, but ours is solutions in healthcare and how we can get out of the big food, big pharma, big big corp stranglehold on your health and your health freedom. But what you're laying out in this book encompasses that, but it encompasses so much more. It encompasses all of that. Right. So I really appreciate you for coming down here and sharing with us. And again, if you want to know more about this book, you can go to www.timeforanewteaparty.com. You can read more about it and read more about Will. And I appreciate you for coming today. And hopefully you'll come back and talk some more.
I'd love to. I appreciate you having me.
Okay.
I do want to say this, that there's nothing more important to secure our freedom than our right to consent. That is paramount, because if we don't secure our freedom by our right to consent to the laws we live by, then we're on the short side of the stick. That's and right. That is paramount. So I invite you, if you go to the website, you'll get a preview of the book, and you'll see that this is our solution.
Make sure if you haven't subscribed that you subscribe. Push the button to the left of me here and subscribe to Psychetruth. If you like our programs, keep coming back. We love to hear from you. Write comments and send us off to your friends. We want to get a dialogue going here. At least we don't have to do it by horse and buggy anymore. We can actually get a dialogue going pretty quickly across the internet. So this is a great tool we've got, and hopefully we can get some information to the people, which is what Wake Up America is all about, is informing you of what you can do and what's going on. So thank you very much, Will.
Thank you,
and we hope to see you back again.
Oh, I'd love to come back.
Okay.
And thank you.
If you liked this video, we have hundreds of more alternative videos ranging from sexual health to psychology to mind control. So if you liked it, go ahead and click on me to enter the Psychetruth channel.